M. The Media Project. Imagine a vibrant region that embraces innovative technology and systems, allowing individuals and businesses to grow and thrive within the natural and cultural lifestyle of Vermont. Imagine the Black River Innovation Campus. Our community includes business and technology programming, co-working and technology tools, and other exciting experiences that are quickly creating an outsized impact to our little corner of northern New England here in Springfield, Vermont. PC Mag rates Springfield, Vermont number 8 for the best work-from-home cities in the U.S. Join us in Vermont. Begin your journey at bricvt.org.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, all of our great fans out in the podcast listening world. You are about to begin another SMGs Are We Here Yet podcast. My guest today, I am really pleased to report, is Tom Fox. Tom was a working class kid from Brooklyn, New York. He's been at the forefront of urban park waterfront development and urban environmental advocacy in New York City since 1975. Tom's work has required a lot of creativity when it comes to financial planning. It's required knowledge of government, of media. It's also required an ever-refined sense for relationships and, frankly, just how to keep things moving. Tom's also been extremely resilient. He's seen the development of the Hudson River Park from the outset. He knows how to win, how to lose, and, frankly, just keep going. And on top of also being a successful entrepreneur, Tom is the author of Creating the Hudson River Park, Environmental and Community Activism, Politics, and Greed. And it's the story that he tells us in his book, and that's why Tom's here to join us today. Tom, welcome. And I just want to say, which do you want to talk about first? Environmental and community action, politics, or greed?
Well, thank you for inviting me. I think they all just wrap into one another and flow because the community environmental activism created the opportunity for politics and greed to try and influence the outcome of the situation, as happens in most cases.
There are many really valuable threads running through this story, and your book takes us comprehensively through the Hudson River Park development, which is an ongoing story, right? I mean, this isn't a story that was ever finished, right? First, tell our listeners just a little bit about where you come in and out of and in what capacity over the last 40 years for this project.
Oh, great. Yeah, I began as I lived in Bank Street in the West Village, and our largest open space was 3 blocks down on the waterfront, but the waterfront was both dangerous, derelict, and abandoned. And what the city and the state did was to move every undesirable thing that you didn't want in your neighborhood out to the water, because the waterfront had been industrial, and it was faced by buildings that were manufacturing, transportation, and warehousing.
You had meat packing over there.
Yeah,
right?
all sorts of things. And so they moved tow pounds and bus garages and concrete plants and literally.
Yeah, it's just everything that you want to have at the back end of the city. And
a prison. They had a floating prison there for
That's right.
8 years. So the powers that be decided in 1974 to propose a new approach to the West Side. Maritime traffic had reached a nadir in terms of the passenger ship industry. People no longer sail to Europe from New York. People no longer sail south from New York. They either flew to Europe or they flew down to Miami and started their trips from Miami or places down south. The cargo industry took a hit when containerization
Yep.
changed the nature of the West Side. And it was a very narrow strip between a elevated highway and the waterfront. So there was no room for containers. And lastly, the ferry industry. The ferries used to bring hundreds of thousands of people across the river every day.
Right.
But the bridges and tunnels knocked those out. So it was like a triple whammy over the course of the first half of the 20th century. So they decided to fill in the river out to the tips of the piers, which is 990 feet, from 36th Street to Battery Park City, which is approximately 2.3 miles. And it was 236 acres of landfill. That would just so happen house 3 million square feet more of Manhattan. And underneath it, they would tunnel an interstate highway. And they would use the federal highway money for landfilling and the roadway as the basis, $2.4 billion. And they had to put up 20%. So they saw it as a way to foster the growth of the city, get the highway rebuilt, use the Fed's money at the same time. But what they forgot about was people who lived there.
Right.
All of the Tribeca, Greenwich Village, Chelsea, Hell's Kitchen. This park runs from Chambers Street in Lower Manhattan to 59th Street in Midtown. It's 4 miles long. So the local community and the environmental community fought against it. And for 11 years, there was a pretty knockdown, drag out fight. And bottom line is we beat 3 presidents, 2 governors, and 3 mayors. And as they say in New York, Westway sleeps with the fishes.
And we should mention anybody fighting against the use of that federal money. We're talking about the same. There were fights going on, the Big Dig in Boston, my former hometown, right? The original dual beltways, right, were fought over during the same time period. And it took, good 20 years to get the alternative, the Big Dig. And I think the Big Dig might have even been, because of that, the last major federal highway construction project, because it was delayed for so long through up into the 90s. And it originally it was conceived in the late 50s, but it took so long, to get through.
Well, everything takes time. People, like, I've been working on Hudson River Park for 40 years. People say, oh my God, that's a long time. Well, this has been mired in controversy for 40 years. It's been kicking and gouging through the mud and the blood and the beer and, fighting every inch of the way. The Central Park, everybody wanted Central Park. They knew it was going to be. It was a mile above the city at the time. Really cared.
Right.
And it was funded by the city. And it took 25 years to build Central Park, which is 846 acres. So it's 24 acres. It's similar in size. This is the second largest park in Manhattan since Central Park, the largest park since Central Park. So after the defeat of Westway, it was defeated because of both hubris and laziness. The Federal Transportation Department and the Army Corps of Engineers did studies on the impact on the fish. The problem was between Battery Park City and Yonkers, 80% of the Atlantic striped bass population breeds just on our side of the river, the eastern side of the river.
Yeah, that's
some
remarkable.
some say it's because we dumped so much raw sewage out there, we provided a lot of food.
Yeah.
And the piers provided shelter for the fish fry. They can hang out and
food and habitat.
Predators.
What more do you need?
If you're an animal, nothing more. And we are animals, don't forget.
That's right.
They had said that the striped bass population would the original FEIS said Westway would have a significant impact on the striped bass population. No, and then the final EIS said took out one word, significant, and Westway will have no impact on the striped bass population. Well, it turned out that they couldn't have seen what was happening with the striped bass because they were doing their studies during the summer, and striped bass are there in the winter. So
It's a pretty material.
and well, this is all the tools you use to shape the future. It turns out that the rewrite of the federal highway legislation was happening in 1985. And the city and the state wanted to roll over Westway into the next rewrite, which would have given them 5 more years. The last ditched effort after we won in court was to lobby all the senators from, I remember calling a friend in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and saying, oh, Malcolm Wallop really never likes money being spent on New York. And there's a $2.4 billion boondoggle that is trying to be pushed through for the next rewrite. Why don't you ask your members of the Cheyenne Community Solar Greenhouse to call Senator Wallop? Long story short, they had no support for including in the rewrite, and they had to find an alternative. So the governor and the mayor wisely set up a task force with 22 members, mostly deputy mayors and agency heads, Port Authority and transportation and DEP and Economic Development Corporation, those types of folks to map out the future of the West Side. And they invited 4 citizens to be members, and I was one of those citizens. So it turned out that we had a 6-month window to create a recommendation, and Arthur Levitt Jr., who became the chair of the SEC, was the chair of the Amex, and he was the chairman of this particular task force. And he hammered out a compromise because landfill was the big boogeyman. So we said, look, there's a right-of-way where the elevated is on the surface. Let's move the road onto the surface and make it a boulevard like Park Avenue.
That's right. Yep.
And then let's put an esplanade next to it. And some of us wanted to map the entire waterfront as a park, which was like, what are you, out of your mind?
This is New York real estate.
Yeah, there were 40-story buildings planned in the river at 36th Street. So the wisely, again, he was Solomonic. He took the landfill off the table and said, can you agree on a boulevard and an esplanade? But they wouldn't even agree on the esplanade because a green next to the water might preclude you from putting something in the water which blocked the views. So there was another year-long fight after the recommendation came out, and the governor and mayor finally accepted the esplanade. They set up a second entity called the West Side Waterfront Panel, which had 7 members, and I was again appointed to that. And we did champion the idea of a world-class waterfront park for the 4 miles, 550 acres of underwater property, and mapping the underwater as an estuarine sanctuary to protect those striped bass and the other seahorses and all the critters that live there. I mean, just because you can't see them, it doesn't mean it's alive.
Well, and the overall ecosystem benefit over time that happens when you restore that habitat, it makes the park even above the water over time is going to be better, right? The rest of the ecosystem, the rest of your other flora and fauna that are going to benefit, because you're doing that kind of work. There's something remarkable I want to point out before you move on for our listeners. One of the things for those of you that are in the midst of a very contentious project like this or are about to embark on one, one of the things I found most valuable about your book, Tom, is, and you just described part of the first of these examples, in my opinion, these relationships, right? Like Arthur and the way this right. This panel first had to work together and stuff. And you seem to have, over the course of this project and in the different ways that you've been a part of the project, you had a keen sense for recognizing, in positive ways, how to use those relationships, how to cultivate those relationships, right? Even in difficult times where, like, as an example in this one, which you haven't quite gotten to yet, but I'm hoping you will,
Sure.
It's sort of as you recognized, Arthur's talents for bringing this panel together and hammering out a result that was going to work for everybody. There were other more purists on the environmental side in this example that kind of said, Tom, we're going to disagree with you, and maybe even to this day still disagree.
They do.
But you had an uncanny ability to compromise in ways that didn't compromise the project per se, but you got the job done. Talk about some of that.
Well, I grew up on the street in Flatbush, and I have old school values of loyalty and camaraderie and the idea that you follow the leader until you are the leader. And when you are the leader, you lead from the front. That's your responsibility. And also I was in the military and spent 2 years in Vietnam in the Navy. So you realize there's an order and you work within the order. One prime example of this is a fellow named Tommy McGuire, who was the head of the Operating Engineers Union, which is all the bulldozer, front end loader, marine construction folks that rebuild piers. And when he first met me at Arthur Levitt Jr.'s office at the American Stock Exchange at a dinner, when Arthur introduced us and he went to tell him my affiliation, Tom said, I know you. You're one of those wacko environmentalists from Greenwich Village. I can't stand your guts. And within 2 years, we were fast friends, because when I went to lunch with him a year later, when the panel was formed, I said, Tommy, look, why are you fighting against the park? If we build buildings in the river, you get the foundation and everything else goes to the carpenters, the plumbers, the steam fitters, and the electricians. If we build a park, it's heavy construction. It's the laborers, the teamsters, and the operating engineers moving earth, building piers. Yeah. And he looked at me and he said, you're not as dumb as you look.
Exactly. And this is what I'm talking about, right? Yeah. Like, you know.
Well, Frank, I believe you have to speak in the other person's language, and you have to respect the other person's currency. They're different than yours are.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean you can't communicate. Actually, you'll never believe it, but Tommy used to call the governor and the mayor directly on his cell phone, not through any intermediary. He was a very important, powerful lobbyist. In Albany, he had. So he actually had me speak in front of 50,000 construction workers at a rally at City Hall, the largest one since the 1930s. And I explained to them that they always pit environmentalists against the construction industry. But I don't build parks, and I don't build aquaria or museums or libraries or sewage treatment plants or, restore natural areas. Without the construction industry, we couldn't do bupkis.
Yeah.
But they keep pitting us against each other so they don't have to do anything. And their big thing is don't spend money on anything you don't want to and lavish the projects you like with resources. So you have to change their priorities either through intimidation, litigation, or the press. And we were very fortunate. The second plan got really strong support. Always go to the media.
The Vermont Technology Alliance. The VTTA is the only statewide organization focused on Vermont's tech business sector and entrepreneurs. Our business members are Fortune 500 companies, startup founders, small business owners, and soloists. We provide advocacy, recruiting of tech talent, events, and other networking opportunities. We are the heart of the tech ecosystem in Vermont. Become a member now at vtta.org. The Vermont Technology Alliance. Tech thrives here.
Now, social media is great. It really is a contemporary tool. But print media and local markets, small town papers or...
And for you at the time, by the way, that's not just, the Times and the other New York papers, but you have neighborhood papers, right? That were
the
critical.
Villager, the West Side Spirit, the Chelsea Clinton News,
100%,
the Downtown
right.
Express. And I would write op-eds. They're always looking for content. Remember that folks in the media need content. And as long as you give them reliable information and you follow up in a timely fashion and tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. You can exaggerate a little bit, but that's about it.
Yeah.
You really can't.
But that still can't be a lie.
You develop, yes, right, exactly. Not, I won't mention any political parties particularly that seem to have a proclivity for that these days. But so make the media your friend, because earned press is better than paid press, advertising.
Yeah.
And social media right now for organizing is a tool I wish we had 40 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, you can rally people at the drop of a hat. You can get, the Greenwich Village Society for Historic Preservation gets 3,000 people to write to the governor in the course of 2 days by sending out a notice to their 30,000 members. So, it's both organized on your side and organized on the media. And remember to share resources. People like folks who help them.
That's right.
I had started a coalition in 1981 of all the greening groups because there was no money for parks and everybody was looking for the same public dollar, same philanthropic dollar, the same media coverage. And it was always my dog can do whatever your dog does better. I won't tell you what I'm going to do because you'll steal my idea and get the same people for funding. So we put them all together and focused on the big issue. Overall, parks are being starved. So let's not focus on your neighborhood, my neighborhood, anybody. Overall, the city is being shortchanged because our parks are being starved. So I wound up with 120 members from the Appalachian Mountain Club to the New York Roadrunners to the Amateur Women's Soccer League and the Green Gorillas and the New York Botanic Garden. Because everybody has a common, so look for common friends. Look for people who have not your specific issue, but your general issue in mind.
Yeah, that commonality. Yeah, it's so key. This is all, it's all just great advice, sound advice. Your another area that I feel like you had some great strength and you had a lot of superstars over the years on your teams was in getting a little creative with a funding mechanism. In fact, I'll pit against this. One of the big frustrations as a reader of the book was to see how you were foiled time and time again.
Yes.
For a permanent, sustainably, I hate we overuse sustainability, but a recurring revenue stream for this park, right? So first, could you explain to people, because I think it's a genius idea. It's also been replicated in other parts of the country, not only for parks, but for other municipal or civic projects, right? And certainly private projects. And then maybe you can explain to us why that didn't happen for the Hudson River Park.
Well, when we decided to build the park, we needed funding. The city's just coming out of bankruptcy or near bankruptcy in 1978. This is 1986. So we're saying, let's build a $500 million park, like a $500 million plus a $400 million roadway on the west side. Didn't go over too well with the controller and the people that dump the beans, so to speak. So you have to generate some sort of revenue. In the park, there were 3 locations that already had 4 million square feet of built space. Pier 40 in Greenwich Village, the Chelsea Piers where the Lusitania left from and the Titanic was to dock.
Right.
And Midtown around Circle Line at 42nd Street. So what we did was triage. You can allow development in these 3 locations, but the money can only go to the design, construction, management, and operation of the park, which didn't happen in New York at the time. All revenue generated by parks goes to the general fund.
Yeah.
But
which could be spent anywhere in a general sense.
Yes.
It gets lost.
Could be spent on, right.
Well, and so essentially it's a design, build, own, operate model. Right. Yes. Just like we would many other types of construction in the private sector, except it's going neighborhood, section of the city by section of the city. Right. And it's sustainable. It can work.
Well, and our first one was a real home run. It was the Chelsea Piers, which we had to vacate. Police, transportation, sanitation, and the MTA, which had 4 piers. And, they said, well, we're not going to leave. And we wound up hiring a diver, going under the pier, condemning the piers and forcing them to leave. even though they didn't want to. And those are things you can do. Engineers are your friends when they're on your side. Um, the other thing was there was already parking there. So basically $100 million private investment went into the Chelsea Piers, and now it is 30 years old this year. We started in 1994.
Wow.
And it just got a lease renewal for 40 more years.
Great.
So, and it creates right now $12 million a year annually for the park.
Is it in that? Let me ask you, if from an operative standpoint, is it in the black?
It is, because they just, believe it or not, once they got their 44-year lease, they flipped the property, sold it to someone for 350 mil, and then got a management contract to run it for the next 40 years. So they're pretty bright too.
There you go. that is. See, now that's what I'm talking about. Now, but some of this gets stymied along the way, right? For other locations of the park.
Well, there were three parts of the funding formula: city, state, and federal money. The money from the discrete development areas within the park that were limited to recreation, entertainment, and maritime. That's it. No housing, no offices, no hotels, nothing that would privatize the park, but things that would complement park use.
Yep.
The other thing was across the street was all this warehousing and transportation and manufacturing, which was changing. So we did a study in 1990 that showed that we could provide significant funding if we did a special assessment district, and anticipated that the inboard would change from those industrial uses to residential and commercial offices. So we proposed having a special assessment district or an impact zone along the waterfront where people would pay an extra to support the park. Well, that went over like a lead balloon with the elected officials. They don't want to be told where to send their money. If you're increasing the tax base, I want that.
Yeah.
And we said, well, if we're increasing the tax base, how about we take a little piece, just a tiny little piece, and use it to support the. Well, here we are 40 years later, or 30 years after this particular adventure, and nada, zip. I'll give you an example. Bloomberg rezoned the entire inboard, the whole length of the park, from those previous industrial uses to residential and offices. Just in next to the convention center, there's 26 million square feet of development going up 60, 70 stories high.
Yep.
Right next to the park. Advertising, live here because the park's across the street. Work here because the park's across the street. How much money did they give to the park? Zippo. Nada.
Yeah.
Nothing. So here they are using it to market their real estate and using it to keep their tenants there, but they're also overcrowding a park that wasn't designed for 70-story buildings across the street.
Right.
And it's really going to fall apart with no revenue. So right now in 2008, we put together a task group that included the Real Estate Board of New York, along with the Regional Plan Association, to put this park improvement district in place, calling it a neighborhood improvement district, basing it off a model for business improvement districts, of which Bloomberg had changed the 42 to 68 of them in the city over his 8-year term. No. So not only did he increase the density of the property, but he refused to set up the improvement district and just kind of let it shuffle along. So now we're trying it for a third time because people are realizing the park's in trouble if it doesn't have long-term maintenance support. And according to our estimates in 2008, by now, a special assessment district where you taxed each square foot of property 0.075 cents, 7.5 cents. So 1,000-foot condominium across the street, you'd pay $75 a year to support the park.
Yeah.
Sounds astronomical.
Very, very small amount to pay. Well, and what's remarkable is
change.
it is the largest, I would guess, I don't know this because I haven't done the math.
Mhm.
I would guess it's the single largest, besides being the most applicable, a single resource for creating a sustainable park system that New York City could come up with to take care of the park. And it's directly tied. When I say it's applicable, it's applicable
one-to-one relationship.
Because parks improve. I'm a developer, in my day job, and parks and green space, if it's well maintained, improves the value of the property you're developing for residential or commercial use. And so why not have that be self-sustaining over time, right?
Well, it has to be, because an unmaintained park in 1986, Central Park was on the balls of its butt. So was Bryant Park and Union Square and all the parks that you think, oh, well, that's New York. There were dust bowls and fires in Central Park.
Yeah.
It was everything was literally falling apart. Maintenance budgets got slashed, personnel got slashed. Well, there's a direct correlation. We did a study in 2008 that showed that the first $75 million section of Greenwich Village, the park section that was completed in 2003, had generated in 5 years $200 million in increased real estate value above the baseline, just because of the proximity of the park. And we compared it to all the other properties along the waterfront. And then all of a sudden, Martha Stewart and the Olsen twins and all these celebrities started.
Everybody's living on the west side, on the lower west side.
Everybody wanted to be on Fifth Avenue before, as far away from the river as you could get. Now everybody wants to live next to it. And the sanctuary has preserved all of the underwater property. And like I said, I was a sailor. We have 4 kayak houses, one of which just celebrated having its 500,000th free kayaker. They give free kayaking. It's a nonprofit. The other kayak houses are membership kayak houses. We have a sailing club. We have boat building, teaching inner city youth how to build and operate Whitehall gigs, big 30-foot rowing boats,
Wow.
into the river. So it's a waterfront park. We have an estuarium now. And we have the River Project, which started off as a nonprofit and eventually became part of the trust. Nonprofit organizations are critical because they tend to not be restricted by some of the things that government agencies are restricted by, and they have passion or they wouldn't be nonprofit. The other thing is, don't discount the government agencies. There's always somebody in a government agency that really wants to get things done and is as frustrated as you are that they can't. Find them, protect them, feed them, and thank them quietly. Don't let anybody know. But really,
it's so true. No, it's so true.
Their job in jeopardy.
It's so true. No, that's right. But it's so true, and they need to know that we're out here,
right?
And are willing to quietly support them. Otherwise, why are they going to stick their neck out, right?
I agree. And when you win something, celebrate, party, pat yourself and everybody else on the back. Yeah. Everybody who participates deserves credit. So like community participation is a pain in the neck, really is. But everybody can say they had a chance to make their ideas known. They might not be selected, but everybody has a chance to influence the outcome. And the length of the process is definitely counterbalanced by the lack of litigation and pushback and demonstrations, because it is a people's park, so to speak, but in a grand scale.
Do you ever just sit back these days and say, wow, look at how far we got? And you did this through the filter of being one of the most used and usable and contentious real estate markets on the entire planet, right? You're on an island, and everyone wants a piece of it. And still do, but yet here is this park, right? Despite all of the pushbacks, setbacks, etc. But let me ask you: did the people, by and large, get what they asked for? Because ultimately, the people did want this, right?
It's interesting that right now, just after this, there's a controversy regarding Pier 76, which is a 5.5 acre pier across from that Dubai on the Hudson Hudson Square, those 70-story
Right.
buildings. They
Right.
say the pier is going to fall into the water, and it's $150 million. So what the government has done, again, don't go across the street and say, hey, there's 27 billion square feet of space, million square feet of space. Why don't you throw a little chunk change? What, $150 million is nothing, excuse me, compared to the value of the property across the street. Instead, they say, well, to save Pier 76, we have to develop half of it. And so it's
It
like,
just never ends.
I'll
Tom.
cut my left arm off. So my right arm, so we can have 2 acres. I'll develop 2.5 acres so we can have 2.5 acres of public space. There's still a heliport in the park. There's helicopters coming in and out, they're buzzing around like flies on a picnic. So, the park is really almost what it should have been or should be. I have different opinions than other people do, and I'm a purist and a plank holder, if you will, speaking from a naval term, on the Hudson River Park. And by the way, I am just one of many, many, many people that made this thing happen. And I dedicated my book to a real estate to Arthur Levitt, the Amex guy, to the Tommy McGuire, the union guy, because these things don't happen without leadership. And Douglas Durst, who was my partner in New York Water Taxi, which I founded in the middle of all of this stuff, to connect parks together.
Yeah, by the way, folks, he also owns a water taxi company.
Well, I started. Yeah.
Or you started it, or however you want to carry it.
We carried 1.5 million people a year to 15 destinations on 11 different vessels.
That's incredible.
And I connected 42nd Street with 23rd Street with Greenwich Village, with Tribeca, so you could get on a boat and hop on and hop off all day long, get off anywhere you wanted. It's now, the model has been actually incorporated by the city of New York. It's the New York City Ferry, and they subsidize the runs. But the park itself has 1,000 mothers and fathers. And I remember in the beginning, Ross Graham, who was the minority speaker of the Senate, his chief of staff, Fred Orenstein, said, I just hope that by the time we get old and we're in wheelchairs, they can push us down the waterfront in a wheelchair, because it was going along so damn slow. Well, Ross, I'm happy to passed away, rest her soul, 2 years ago at 92. And when she was 87, she was walking to the Chelsea Pier to go swimming every day.
Oh,
so
that's great.
I thought, it's the trouble about getting a little long in the tooth here is that many of the folks you started off with are no longer with you. But that's why I wrote the book, for 2 reasons. One is to thank everybody that really made it happen and let people know who really screwed it up, just from my opinion. And then secondarily, to teach the next generation the hustle. I call it the hustle. You jump from stone to stone, you make it up as you go, you put your finger in the wind, you see which way it's blowing so you don't get blown into the water, but you always keep moving.
Folks, the book is Creating the Hudson River Park. The author is Tom Fox. Tom, I want to thank you for coming on the show today.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it, Scott. And everybody, don't give up. That's all. Don't give up. No matter what they do, just bounce back.
SMG's Are We Here Yet podcast is a production of M the Media Project and SM Graves Associates. Learn more at smgravesassociates.com. In the jazz room, we met pianist-composer Arturo O'Farrell after his set at the Newport Jazz Festival. We talked about his Grammy-winning album, 4 Questions. In part 1, we talk about the influence of Dr. Cornel West and the 4 Questions as the inspiration of his album. Learn more about Arturo at www.arturofarrell.com. And now, enjoy the show.
Hello, My name is Arturo O'Farrell, and I'm inviting you to join me in the jazz room with our wonderful hostess, Joan Watson-Jones.
Hello, welcome to the Jazz Room. I'm your host, Joan Watson-Jones. Thanks for stopping by. Come in, relax while we enjoy great jazz. Each show, we present the music of independent jazz artists, as well as those we've grown to love through the years. And yes, of course, the legends. You're listening to the music of our guest, pianist-composer Arturo O'Farrell. This piece is titled Baby Jack from his Grammy-winning album, 4 Questions. We met with him after his set at the Newport Jazz Festival. He tells us about his inspiration for this project, 4 Questions, and much, much more. Enjoy. welcome to the Jazz Room.
Oh, I'm so thrilled to be here. You have no clue.
I think I do have a clue.
This is, probably the preeminent gathering of musicians that I can think of. It's just a privilege to be here. It has been for decades.
And you're lucky to get in on the, how shall I say, in with that group.
This has been an amazing year for me. I'm about to release my first Blue Note record.
Okay.
And it's been a year this is an incredible, painful, unbelievable year, but it's been very productive. We've recorded 3 CDs, released 3 CDs this year, an album, and produced 65 weeks of a streaming show called Virtual Birdland. So what happened? I'll tell you what happened. When the virus hit, I was terrified that musicians were going to lose, because we lost everything, all the gigs. On March 10th of 2020, I had months of work. On March 12th, it began to cancel, and by March 14th, it was gone. Nowhere. And so, my heart went out, and I said, we got to do something. So I got my musicians together. We did a weekly stream, and we raised $110,000 to give to musicians. So this was do or die.
Yes, no, I understand that. I was going to go there because I wanted to talk more about how you started the Alliance Emergency Artist Fund, right? That's
yeah.
what it's called. Okay. Yes. So I want to talk about that, but right now I want to, first of all, we're here at the Newport Jazz Festival.
The preeminent
Yes.
Newport Jazz Festival.
And I want to talk about your project, 4 Questions.
Okay.
I sat down and I started looking for you and finding it, and the music came to me, and it was like so moving.
Wow.
And so personal.
Wow.
In a way.
That means the world to me.
I wanted you to know that, but I want people to know about the 4 questions.
Wow.
Can you first state those 4 questions for the audience so that then we can talk about the music and everything. But I could see how you put this together, and the project is called 4 Questions.
Yeah, I mean, the 4 questions, and I can't state them directly because I just get them all crazy mixed up in my... But they're based on 4 questions that... oh, my God. That W.E.B. Du Bois poses in his book Souls of Black Folk, that Cornel West espouses on. And it's funny because in a way the book is not about the 4 questions, but Cornell zeroes in on that part of the book. And he speaks to so many issues that are facing society. So I'm a big Cornel West fan anyway, and I've been listening to him speak for years. Never really saw him until I'm kind of a little bit of a leftist, and I was invited to speak I was invited to be on a host committee with Dr. Cornel West at Riverside Church, and so I'd never really seen him, and I loved his speaking. And when I saw him, I literally watched. It was like kinetic waves of energy and light and stuff were coming out of him, and so I realized that I love the speech that he gives on the 4 questions, and I wanted to set it to music. So I nervously went up to Cornell and I said, Mr. West, because he's been to see me play, and I said, Mr. West, do you mind if we can do a project? He was very nice about it, and he gave me his number, and I would call him, and I would call him, and I would call him, and he was such a busy man. He would never get back to me. Finally, I said, man, he's a busy cat. I love him. I'm just going to leave him a musical message. So I put the phone next to the piano, and I wailed for like about 5 minutes. And I got a call from him within the minute. saying that was strong, Brother O'Farrell. That was strong. And no, so he invited me to be on a host committee for some demonstrations and some concerts, not concerts, speeches, rallies that he was doing. And I explained to him the project, and this is the true story. Okay, this is the true how it really happened. I went to see him at Riverside Church. Oh, no, the church on West End Avenue. Anyway, he was speaking. When he finished speaking, the hair on the back of my head stood up. Man, I was blown away. And all of a sudden, the MC said, "And now we'll have a word from Arturo O'Farrell." So I'm like, I'm going to follow Cornel West. So I got up at the church on 86th and West End Avenue and just extemporaneously spoke about my children and the grave injustices that I saw. Specifically, it's some young men that were killed by the NYPD. They broke my heart and destroyed me. And at the end of it, he ran up off the podium and he said, "That was strong, Brother O'Farrell. Let me invite you to join me on the podium." And that's when I was able to speak to him about doing the recording, and he was very gracious. He came in. We did it at the Apollo. We performed the 4 questions at the Apollo, and then, we've had the opportunity to do it a couple more times. And as a matter of fact, we're scheduled to do it again at NJPAC. So keep an eye out for Cornel West and Arturo Farrell. He is an incredible man. He's an incredible spiritual soul. Just the things that he does and the stance that he takes and the example he gives us is huge. I just love him. I love Cornel West. So it was incredible to ask him to do this recording with me, to get him on the Apollo, and then to get him into the recording studio, and then to maintain a friendship with him.
You got him in the recording studio, and I listened to that piece with his speech.
Yeah.
And musically, I'm going something I've always been taught about music. I'm a singer. And he said, singing is just glorified speech.
Yes, and even more, yeah.
And that was so much the way you wove the music around his voice, even in the same key.
There's a funny story. There's a funny story to that.
How many people pick that up, right?
There's a funny story to that, because I actually, when I approached him about doing it, and he said he would be down for doing it, I actually transcribed the cadence of his speech. In fact, the very one I think that he gives in Princeton. I don't know, but I caught the pitches and the cadence, and I wrote it out like notes, because I figured, when he'd just go ahead, and I said, "Here's the notes," and he looked at me and said, "Okay, no problem, I'll take it home and study." And then, of course, when we got to the studio, he did it his own way anyway. He made up new things. He virtually improvised the speech, but it worked, because when I transcribed the original speech that he gave, I caught the nuance and the cadence of his speaking. So it was almost as if it was better than if he actually replicated what I transcribed. And it's just it's just some people whose spiritual energy is so powerful that they are able to control so much of the environment around them. And that's what Cornel West is.
Yes.
He just speaks, and it's truth, and you got to listen, and that's it.
Breaking Housing Matters is a national housing initiative building housing profitably. It is a first-of-its-kind initiative currently being piloted in Rutland City, Vermont, USA. BHM brings multiple key stakeholders from the housing development ecosystem together to solve the dual issues of affordability and profitability. Participate in an all-ships-rise approach designed by a multiplicity of internationally recognized experts in development, economics, housing, and governance. Donate, start a petition for your community, or learn more at breakinghousingmatters.org. Press and program inquiries, please contact our Vermont Director, Scott Graves, at scott@breakinghousingmatters.org.
Here now is 4 Questions, featuring Dr. Cornel West. You're in the Jazz Room. I'm your host, Joan Watson-Jones.
What a blessing, what an honor, what a privilege to be here with my dear brother Arturo, Pharaoh with the Afro-Latin Jazz Orchestra. We keep alive a tradition of tremendous nobility and unbelievable royalty. I'm talking about Chico O'Farrill and Dizzy Gillespie. I'm talking about James Brown and Tito Puente. I'm talking about Aretha Franklin and Celia Cruz. It's the caravan of love in the language of the Isley Brothers, or what John Coltrane called a love supreme. Blessed to be another love warrior in this great tradition. I am who I am because somebody loved me. The highest honor I will ever have is being the second son of Irene and Clifton West. I'm from the chocolate side of Sacramento, California, Shiloh Baptist Church. Reverend Willie B. Cook, Deacon Hinton, and Sarah Ray, my Sunday school teacher. This is crucial because what it means to look terror in the face, trauma in the face, stigma in the face, and still respect yourself, still love yourself while loving others. In the face of 400 years of terrorism, 400 years of stigmatism, 400 years of trauma, we didn't produce a black Ku Klux Klan, a black ISIS. We produced Frederick Douglass, Ida B. Wells, Barnett Harriet Tubman, and W.E.B. Du Bois, Paul Robeson, and Fannie Lou Hamer. What is it about these people in the face of so much hatred, dishing out such love in the face of so much injustice, teaching the world so much about justice? Of them all is W.E.B. Du Bois. He was a love warrior in the life of the mind, and he raised four fundamental questions that sit at the center of this tradition of love struggle. The first question: how shall integrity face oppression? He didn't say cupidity. He didn't say love of money. He didn't say venality. He didn't say selling your soul for a mess of pottage. We know we live in a culture in which everybody's for sale. Everything is for sale. But where's the moral core? Where's the ethical center? Where's what Jane Austen called constancy? That's what Du Bois was talking about. Where is the integrity in a highly commodified culture? It's in the music. It's in your life. It's in your struggle. It's in your witness. It's in your work. Voice's second question. What does honesty do in the face of deception? We live in an age of mendacity, an age of criminality where the lies hide so many crimes. The precious children killed by U.S. drones in Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Somalia and Yemen. Crimes on Wall Street with not one Wall Street executive gone to jail. Mass incarceration, especially among poor and working people, disproportionately chocolate. Massive unemployment, massive underemployment. Not enough health care. All of these ways of losing sight of the precious humanity of God's children. What we gonna do about the lies and the crimes? Are we willing to have an honesty and tell the truth? And the condition of truth is always to allow suffering to speak. Question. What does decency do in the face of insult? Emmett Till's mother teach us something about spiritual maturity. What did you have to say when your precious baby was lying in that coffin? You kept that coffin open and told the world, I don't have a minute to hate. I will pursue justice for the rest of my life. What moral excellence, what spiritual depth. That fourth question, that last query. What does virtue do in the face of brute force? What does courage do in the face of violence? How do you preserve the humanity of the others who are dehumanizing you? How do you preserve your spirit so that you can straighten your backs up? And whenever, every day, people straighten their backs up, they're going somewhere because folk can't ride your back unless it's bent. Stand. Be fortified. Be strong. Be of preparedness in your armor, in your move from your mama's womb to tomb. Playing that stride. Little James P. Johnson. There's a little Willie the Lion Smith. Oh, I hear some Fats Waller too. Throw a little Thelonious Monk in there. Oh my God, here come Duke Ellington, Mary Lou Williams, and a little Jerry Allen too. Oh my God, Red Garland. Yeah, little McCoy Tyner, Tommy Flanagan. Oh, you're hurting me now. Oh yeah. Of superficiality, cold-heartedness, and mean-spiritedness, where Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel says indifference to evil is more evil than evil itself. Indifference is the one trait that makes the very angels weep. Where is the spiritual courage? Where is the moral courage? Listen to the music, listen to the orchestra, listen to the piano.
This ends part one of our interview with Arturo O'Farrell. Learn more about him at arturoofarrell.com. In part two, we'll talk about that still small voice that's within us all and the Afro-Latin Jazz Emergency Fund.
Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they pierced him in the side? Were you there when they nailed him to the cross? Were you there when the sun didn't shine? It causes me to tremble. Oh, tremble. Were you there? Were you there? Were you there when they murdered Brother Martin Luther King Jr., when they assassinated Malcolm X? Were you there when they beat Fannie Lou Hamer like a dog? Were you there when Michael Brown Jr.'s body lay on that street in Ferguson? Despair never has the last word. The caravan of love goes on, the triumph of a love supreme. Listen to the music, listen to the sound.
We've come to the end of another show. Thank you for spending time here with us in the Jazz Room. We love hearing from you. You can now find the Jazz Room on Twitter at Ms. Jazz Kitty, and you may email me or chat with me on the Jazz Room page of my website, JoanWatsonJones.com. Until next time, you've been in the Jazz Room. I'm your host, Joan Watson Jones.
The Jazz Room is distributed by M the Media Project and SM Graves Associates. Learn more at smgravesassociates.com.